Hi everyone and welcome back to GH Glass Audiobooks. Now before we get into this next story, I need your help to grow this channel. Growing this channel means I can bring on board some top class narrators and a lot more of the stories you love to listen to. So please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Become a part of this journey. Now let's get into the next story. This is an unabridged recording of Trojan Six, Part 3, written and narrated by G.H. Glass. Chapter 1. The depot yard looked half dead under the floodlights. A handful of engines idled in the dark, coughing diesel fumes into the air. Radios hissed and crackled from open doors. Someone shouted for a head count. Someone else called out the number of working rifles left in the cage. The place had a feel of a shift that would never end. Daniel Kerr stood by the bonnet of a transit van with the paint scraped off its sides. The ARV was gone, abandoned at the Barbican after the last run. He'd taken what he could carry and walked back on foot. Now, the van was all he had. A plain white box with steel mesh in the back and tyres that still held air. Superintendent Doyle came out of the operations room. A coat over her body armour, a clipboard in one hand. Her face was streaked with the day. "You going out again, aren't you?" she said. Kerr nodded. "We're heading out to Romford. Ellie Hales and the kids." "Wait, she's still alive?" "Yeah, she called in. Said the house is holding, but those things are outside. If we move now, we can get them before the convoy rolls out." Doyle looked past him at the yard. "We're rolling before dawn. You know that, right?" "I'll be back before then," Kerr said. "She's got 2 children. Mark would have gone for them." Doyle studied him. The words had landed heavier than he meant. "You'll have Harris with you," she said at last. "He knows the roads east. You leave in 10. But if you're not back before we pull out, we're not waiting." "I know," Kerr replied. Doyle glanced forwards towards the city, a horizon of faint orange and smoke. "She doesn't know about him yet, does she?" Kerr shook his head. "Not yet." "Then you make it worth the trip," Doyle said, and walked away. Inside the depot's main block, the operations room looked stripped to its bones. Desks pushed to the walls, whiteboards wiped clean except for half a route plan, arrows heading east and then south. Someone had torn a map off its pins to take with them. A kettle hissed in a corner with no one paying any attention. Kerr found Harris by the window. The young officer was checking his rifle on a cleared table, feeding rounds into a magazine by touch. His sleeves were rolled, one forearm wrapped in gauze from a scrape he hadn't bothered to mention. He looked up at Dan. "You sure about this one, Sarge?" Kerr nodded back at him. "We've got a location, a working phone, and my partner's family. That's more important than anything else on that board right now." Harris clicked the last round in and set the magazine aside. "The convoy's leaving in an hour, mate." "Then I suggest we don't hang around," Kerr replied. Superintendent Doyle came in again, holding the radio against the shoulder. "Gold's dropped a line to Central. We're running blind until we clear the M25. You two are the last out. Keep it short, keep it quiet." Kerr looked at the remaining kit piled by the door. First aid packs, a jerry can, 3 boxes of mixed ammunition, none of them full. "We'll take the van from Bay 4, he said. "It's slow, but it's reliable." "Confirmed," Doyle replied. "You'll have handsets on local only. No data or control. You're on your own from the gate, lads." She paused, watching the 2 of them load what was left. "This isn't an order, Kerr. You can stay. We need every gun we've got if this place turns before we move." Daniel Kerr turned back to meet her gaze. "If she was your family, you'd go." Doyle nodded once, slow. "You're right. Doesn't make it less stupid, though." Harris pulled the van keys from the hook and tossed them once in his hand. "We'll be back before you've even finished drinking tea," he said, trying to lighten the tone. Doyle almost smiled at the flippancy. "You've got until dawn, lads," she said. "After that, we're ghosts." The sound of engines outside rolled through the thin walls, a reminder that the clock was already ticking. The van sat in Bay 4 beneath a tired strip light. The back was half packed. Riot shields, a duffel of spare plates, a couple of jerry cans. Harris moved along the lockers like he was checking a roll call, opening and closing doors with an automatic patience. He pulled out a crate and tipped it to count. 9 mils short 2 boxes, he said. "Rifle mags, 3 full, 2 partial. That's not a lot for long-range work." Kerr looked into the rack. Two G36Cs were slunged and rigged, muzzles pointed down and safe. Each had a single loaded magazine and two spares clipped to the webbing. Beside them, two Glocks sat in holstered bolted to the bulkhead. On a lower shelf, in a foam cutout, a short two-shot breacher shotgun lay wrapped in an oilcloth. Kerr touched the stock, then checked the chamber flag with one practiced motion. "We just got to run with what we've got," he said. "Both G36Cs, one sidearm each, and I've got the breacher." Harris frowned and counted the magazines again with his thumb. 3 full between us, 2 halves. That won't see us through a long time. Kerr took one of the spare mags and slugged it into his vest pouch as if confirming a promise with the weight. "Then we use them when they matter. Close work steel, quiet work steel. The guns are for denial and distance." Harris nodded and reached into a corner locker. He pulled out a hardened crowbar and a short-handled sledge. He tested the hammer with a knuckle, checked the balance. "Old school," he said, "heavy and honest." Kerr strapped the breacher across his back and ran his fingers along the pump. "This'll do more than a crowbar if we need a stopgap," he said. 2 rounds in the chamber, both slugs. It'll put a body through a plaster wall if it needs to." "How many slugs have we got?" Harris asked. "Only the 2, Kerr replied, "and a spare box of buckshot in the locker." They finished the list. Water, a strip of ration bars, and a folded map. Outside, someone shouted for the gate to be manned. The sound of engines warming moved along the rows of vehicles like a heartbeat. Harris took the driver's seat. He checked the mirrors and then looked back at Kerr. "We go quiet unless we have to stop," he said. Kerr shut the locker with the heel of his hand. "We make every shot count, and if the rounds run out, then we hit 'em whatever we got left." A line of men at the gate watched them move. Doyle stood near the front of the yard, arms folded and jaw set. She didn't call them back. When they passed, she gave them a small nod and a quick cut of the hand. Harris killed the cab lights and eased them through the manned gate. They dropped into the artery that fed out of the depot, a long yaw that opened into arterial streets, chewed by abandoned traffic. The city outside the compound looked half curated, cars left in wrong places, a bus sliding off its route to rest with its doors open, a shopping trolley overturned and still, streetlights burned like tired teeth. "Check door locks," Kerr said. "Keep it dark when you can." Harris nodded and reached for the dimmer. He scanned the side streets with a steady eye. He watched a silhouette move behind a shuttered shop and shifted the van's path away to give it a wider berth. The radio on the dash spat nonsense channels for a second and died back to static. They drove slow enough to hear the city breathing. Somewhere to the north a siren cut and died. Farther off, a pop of small arms fire. Harris kept the van between curbs, choosing lines that gave them cover and a speedy exit. When they passed a row of terraced houses, a figure moved at a doorway. A head turned to them with a blank face. Harris glanced at Kerr. "Not one of ours," he said. "That's someone else's problem," Kerr replied. The depot's engines shrank behind them. The road ahead was a ribbon of dark with signs of life at the edges. Burnt out cars and a flicker of flame. A figure on a pavement that had once been a runner. They had the van, the weapons, a map with a penciled route, and a time that was already getting small. They cleared the industrial estate and joined the main road east. The van's tyres hissed over broken glass. The traffic light still worked at random, switching from red to green with no one to see it. A low fog had rolled in from the river, thin enough to move through, thick enough to dull the light from the few lamps that still burnt. Harris drove with both hands, eyes never leaving the tarmac. "It looks worse with every mile," he said. His voice was calm, not conversational, just a thought put into air. Kerr unfolded a map across his knees. "We'll stay off the A13, it's too exposed. Cut through Hackney and pick up Romford Road before the viaduct." "That's all side streets, mate. It's better than getting boxed in on one of the main roads." They passed a petrol station with its shutters torn down. A car lay on its roof at the forecourt. Harris slowed as they went by. There was movement behind the pumps. 1 person, maybe 2. Too slow for an injured. Kerr lifted his rifle, sighted out of habit, and then let it go. They weren't in range, and it didn't matter. A few streets on, the fog brightened with an orange glow. The heat shimmered before they saw the fire. A small truck sat on its side, burning in the middle of the road. Smoke trailed off into the night. Harris downshifted and took them to a side street. Someone had tried to block it previously with wheel bins and a mattress, but the van pushed through. They didn't speak for a while. Every sound outside seemed close. But Harris broke the silence. "When you called her, mate, what did she say?" "She said the house was holding." Kerr folded a map and tucked it back into the dash. "She said the back garden was clear." "Did you tell her about Mark?" "Nah, not yet, mate." Harris nodded once. "You're going to have to at some point, you know. Look, we're going to just cross that bridge when she's safe." They turned another corner and saw a stretch of dark shop fronts. Shutters half down, broken glass on the pavement. The sign for a DIY store hung at an angle, light still flickering inside. A pallet of tools stood by the doorway, half taken, half spilled. Harris slowed the van. "We could use some more steel." Kerr looked at the tools, then at the street ahead. No movement. Let's make it quick. He opened his door. The air outside smelt of smoke and rust and something under it that didn't belong to London. The DIY store was half lit, humming on backup power. Rows of tools and paint tins stood in sharp lines. Everything clean and just wrong. The smell of timber and petrol and dried blood sat heavy in the air. Kerr led the way, crowbar ready, muzzle of the G36 down but close. The automatic door hung half open, wedged by a toolbox. Harris moved behind him, sweeping the aisles with a low light. They stepped inside. Every sound carried. The low hum of the generator, the soft squeak of their boots on the floor, and a faint wet sound somewhere behind the checkout counters. Kerr raised a hand. "Do you hear that?" Harris stopped moving. The sound came again. A low scrape. Then a breath that wasn't right. Daniel Kerr moved towards the noise, keeping his angle tight. He turned the corner of the aisle and saw a man hunched over on the counter. Builder's trousers and a high-vis vest. The whole front of him soaked. His head moved, slow, up and then down, biting at something on the floor that was unrecognisable. "Stay back," Kerr said quietly. The man's head snapped up. The mouth opened wider than it should have. A flash of teeth, blood around the jaw. He stumbled forward, hands out, eyes wide but empty. Kerr didn't fire. He swung the crowbar one-handed and caught the man across the temple. The sound was dull, not sharp. The man staggered but didn't drop. "Christ," Harris muttered. Daniel Kerr hit him again, harder, at an angle. The man fell, but caught himself on one hand and lunged again. The breath rattled out of him, but he kept coming. Kerr stepped forward and brought the bar down on top of the skull. Once, twice. The steel rang on bone. On the third hit, the skull cracked but didn't cave. It was sickening. A heavy rhythm. Strike, drag, strike, and again, until the thing finally stopped moving. Kerr stood over him, breathing hard. The crowbar was slick and dark at the end. He wiped it on his sleeve and looked at Harris. "That's no good in a pinch, mate. You've got to crush the skull clean. This thing just spreads it around." Harris nodded, his eyes still on the mess on the floor. "Then we find something that'll split." They moved to the nearest display rack, rummaged around a crate, and came up with a hatchet. He tested the weight in one hand. Solid handle, good balance. He tossed another to Kerr. "Here, these are lighter and quicker." Kerr caught it by the haft. "Check the edge. That's better," he said, spinning it around in his grip. The lights flickered once overhead. The hum of the generator dropped and came back. Somewhere deeper in the store, something moved against a shelf, slow and soft. Kerr tightened his grip on the hatchet. "Let's stock up and get out before we make any more friends." They were almost back at the door when the noise came again, heavier this time, from the warehouse section behind the plastic strip curtain. A scrape and then a clatter of metal hit the floor. Kerr froze. Harris lifted the hatchet, edge out, the handle tight in both hands. Kerr leaned close enough to whisper, "That's more than one." The curtain shifted. Three shapes pushed through, slow and uncoordinated, half silhouetted by the light from the loading bay. Their boots dragged, rubber soles squealing on the floor. One had a builder's apron tied around his waist. The other's shirt was torn open from collar to belt. All of them carried the same smell, old blood and sweat. "Stand to," Kerr said. The first one came fast once it saw them, head low, hands reaching. Kerr stepped sideways and swung the hatchet. The edge bit at the side of the skull and caught bone. He tore it free and swung again, shorter, across the neck this time. Dark red blood spurted out from the artery in its neck, and its body fell against a tool rack and took half a shelf with it. The second stumbled over the mess of tins and timber. Harris met it before it got back up. He drove his hatchet into the side of its face and used the weight of his shoulder to push it down. The sound was solid. The infected's face was cleaved half off, revealing parts that no human was ever supposed to see. He wrenched the tool back, breathing hard and fighting his own body's gag reflex. The third kept coming, slower but deliberate, both hands out as if it still remembered what it was meant to grab. Kerr stepped forward and shoved it into a display of garden tools. Handles clattered to the floor. He put his boot on its chest and brought the hatchet down once, clean and final. The body went limp where it lay. Silence dropped into the room like a blanket. Both men stood still, waiting for more movement, but none came. Kerr looked at Harris, both of them breathing in shallow bursts. "That's better," he said, fast and quiet. Harris nodded, wiping the handle on blue tissue from a shelf. "They don't stop easy, do they?" "Nothing does anymore, mate." They stepped out into the night, shutting the door behind them. The generator's hum dropped away, and the quiet returned, thick and uneven. The street was darker now. The fires they had seen from the depot were closer, turning the low clouds into dull red. Harris walked a few paces ahead, scanning both sides of the road. Kerr checked their backs. Every sound is amplified now. The hiss of tyres and broken glass, the small rattle of kit in the van, their own breathing. They passed a line of parked cars, everyone with a door open or glass missing. A takeaway sign banged against a wall, hanging from one chain. Nothing out here moved anymore, but the feeling of being watched was everywhere. Harris glanced into the rear mirror as he drove. "Feels wrong just leaving them there like that. The shop, I mean. They're gone," Kerr said. "We didn't have time to make sense of this." "Daniel, how is this actually happening? How is this even real?" "You're looking at the wrong man for answers, mate. I'm still expecting to wake up and this nightmare be over," Kerr replied in all honesty. At the next junction they slowed. A body lay across the white line in the middle of the road, arms spread. It didn't move as they rolled past, but both men watched it in silence until it disappeared into the mirrors. "When this started," Harris said, "I thought it'd be done in an hour or two. Just a bit of people panic. Police would get a grip of the situation and it'd calm down. 5 hours in," Kerr said, "and the bloody city's finished. And now we head north with the rest and hope for containment, or just something better," Kerr said as he shrugged his shoulders. "I don't like the word hope. It's being banded around a lot at the minute. Hopium's a powerful drug," said Harris with a serious stare. "Hopium? I like that," Kerr smiled. The van's tyres hit a stretch of clear road and the ride smoothed out. Harris turned off the headlights for a few seconds, letting his eyes adjust. In the dark, London looked hollow. Houses standing but empty, streetlights flickering over nothing. Kerr unfolded a map on his lap again and marked the last position with a thumb. 2 miles to Romford Road. If we're lucky, we'll reach the army checkpoint before 4. Harris gripped the wheel tighter. "Do you really think they'll still be there?" "They'll hold as long as they can," Kerr said. "They're just doing the same as us." A few turns later, the empty streets widened into a junction that glowed under floodlights. Concrete barriers boxed off 3 lanes. Beyond them sat 2 armoured trucks and a pair of Land Rovers, engines idling. Soldiers moved between the vehicles, silhouettes under the glare, rifles up. One shouted, the sound muffled under his respirator. Harris slowed the van and lifted a hand through the window. "Police! Plaistow Depot," he called. "2 on board." The soldier nearest to the barrier aimed his torch into the cab, checking faces. He lowered it, and after a second waved them through. "Stop before the line," he said, "and keep the windows up." Daniel Kerr could see the barricade ahead, sandbags, coils of wire, and an overturned vehicle being used as cover. There were more soldiers here than expected, maybe 20, some sitting, some scanning the streets with night sights. The air smelt of diesel and cordite. A captain came up to the window, helmet strapped tight, radio cord looped around his shoulder. "Where are you guys heading?" "Romford," Kerr said. "Civilians trapped, we're going to pull them out." The man's eyes were raw from lack of sleep. "You've got an hour before this position folds. We're supposed to fall back to Barking at first light." "Orders and habit," the captain replied. "We've still got ambulances trying to come through here from the hospital. Anything south of here's gone. You guys must have seen it." Kerr nodded. "Every single street." The captain looked down the road, his jaw tight. "If you make it back here, Back this way and we're still here. Tag along with us. If not, he stopped himself. Don't stop. Just keep bloody driving. Understood, Kerr replied. The captain stepped back and waved them forward. A pair of soldiers pulled aside the wire and they eased past. Harris glanced at the lines of men behind the sandbags, every face pale under the lights. Still look organised, he said. Kerr watched one of the soldiers feed a belt of machine gun ammunition, hands shaking from fatigue. For now, mate. They cleared the junction and turned east. The noise of the checkpoint faded behind them until it was just that, what I can't even read. They cleared the junction and turned east. The noise of the checkpoint faded behind them until all that was left was the hum of the van and the quiet space between breaths. How long do you think they'll last out there? Harris asked. Kerr looked out at the dark road ahead. I'm hoping it could be long enough for us to come back through. After that, it's anyone's guess. They reached the crossroads and stopped. In the distance, a thin column of smoke climbed into the dark. It was in the direction they were heading. Kerr pulled out his phone, checked for signal. 1 bar. He called Ellie. It rang twice before she answered. Her voice came in low and broken. Daniel? I'm here, he said. We're close now. How's the heist? They're at the back fence, she said. I can hear them. They don't stop. Her breath caught on the line. The kids are upstairs. Layla keeps asking when you're going to be here. Keep everyone quiet and stay away from the windows, Kerr said. Lock the landing door if you can. We're 10 minutes out. Harris glanced at him. Kerr kept his voice even. We'll come in from the side street. When you hear us knock, you open the back door. Do you understand? Yes, she said. The line went still for a second. Then, Daniel, Mark said if anything ever happened, I should call you. Kerr swallowed, eyes fixed on the road ahead. He was right. We'll be there soon. He ended the call before she could ask the next question. The van moved on. Houses become smaller, older. Somewhere ahead a dog barked once and then went quiet. The last mile ran in silence. The smoke they'd seen from the crossroads spread low across the streets. A grey film over rows of parked cars. Somewhere out there, a fire had burned itself out. Harris eased the van across the curb and killed the lights. The dashboard glow faded until only the clock showed 03:47. Dawn was still an hour off. Kerr leaned forward, watching the house number slide past in the dark. Slow here, he said. They turned into a narrow street of small semis. Every drive had a car half out, doors open, alarms silent, curtains moved in windows with no one behind them. The whole place had gone hollow. That's it, Kerr said, third on the left. Harris pulled to a stop 2 houses short. They sat for a few seconds, engine ticking down. From here, Kerr could see the Hales' front garden. The low hedge had been flattened. 3 shapes moved in it, slow, bent at the waists, pressing their hand against the bay windows. The glass flexed but held. Harris saw it too. They're already on her. Kerr nodded once. We'll come in from the back. Keep the engine ready for a fast exit. He checked his vest, tightened his strap on the breecher across his back, and unclipped the hatchet from his belt. Harris mirrored him, pulling his own weapon clear and slipping the sling of his rifle on one shoulder. Quiet, Kerr said. No lights, no shouting. We get in, we get them, we get out. They stepped from the van. The air outside was cold, heavy with the smell of wet soil and smoke. Every step on the pavement sounded too loud. A few doors down, something moved behind a parked car, a shape rising, steadying itself on the bonnet, turning towards the sound. Another answered from the far side of the street. Kerr raised his hand to stop Harris. Leave them, he said, eyes front. They slipped through a side gate into a narrow run of houses. They slipped through a side gate into a narrow run of gardens behind the houses. The fences were low, the woods soft with damp. From here, they could hear the noise from inside the Hales' place. The dull thud of fists on glass, the scrape of feet on gravel, a woman's voice faint but steady, calming someone inside. Kerr crouched by the last fence and looked over. The back garden was small. A washing line still hung with clothes that stirred in the wind. A kitchen light glowed through some curtains. At the end of the garden, a wooden gate shivered with every impact from the other side. He looked back at Harris. This is it, mate. Harris nodded, jaw set. You sure she's still got that back door locked? She said she did. Then let's make it quick. They climbed the fence and dropped into Hales' garden, and took positions by the back wall. The thudding on the gate was louder now. wood starting to split. Kerr lifted the hatchet, feeling for the weight in his hand. We can't wait for her to come unlock this door. That back gate's going to give way any second. We need to get in there and get them out. On 3. Harris raised his weapon, breath fogging in the cold. Ready when you are. Kerr looked once at the house, then at the weak morning light creeping up behind the roofs. 1, he said quietly. The sound of the gate creaking cut through the dark. 2. Something heavy hit the other side of the fence and slid down, leaving a smear. 3. They moved, and the night seemed to lead in closer. Chapter 2. Kerr's 3 was barely out when he moved. The back door gave on the first hit, a dull crack as the bolt split from the frame. He stepped through first, rifle up, Harris right behind, covering the corners. The kitchen was dark except for the orange wash from a street lamp leaking through the curtains. A fridge hummed somewhere close, the sound deafening in the stillness. Nothing moved. The air was thick with bleach and gas, the smell catching in their throats. Kerr raised a hand and pointed left. Harris cleared a small utility room, then the dining space, silent and methodical. Kerr moved through to the hall. The front door shuddered with another heavy blow, but it was holding for now. They stopped at the bottom of the stairs, listening. A faint sound carried down, a child whispering, a soft reply from a woman, then silence again. Kerr lowered his rifle and took 2 slow steps. He knocked twice on the wall beside the banister, the signal he'd promised her. There was a short pause, then the landing light flicked on. Ellie's voice came down, low but clear. Daniel? Keep your voice down, he said. We're in. Bring the kids. Stay close to the wall. Footsteps above. Then the shape of a woman appeared at the top, one hand on the rail, a small figure behind her clutching a sleeve. Relief hit Kerr harder than he expected. He motioned to Harris. All clear so far, he said quietly. Let's get them out before the front gives. They started up the stairs together, the sound of fists on the front door growing sharper with every step. Halfway up the stairs, the landing light caught them full. Ellie was barefoot, hair tied back, a cardigan pulled over a nightdress. She had a knife in her hand, the kind you just grab from the kitchen without thinking. Leela stood just behind her, clutching the banister, face pale but steady. Tom peered through the railings, thumb pressed to his mouth, eyes wide in terror. Kerr lowered his rifle a little. It's all right, he said quietly. We're here now. Ellie nodded, her eyes flickering past him to Harris before coming back. How bad is it outside? It's bad enough we can't stay, Kerr said. We've got a van 2 houses over. We move now while the road's still clear. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice level. They've been at the front door for over an hour. The glass keeps bowing. It'll hold for a few more minutes, Kerr said. We'll use the back, one at a time down the stairs. No noise if you can help it, and put some trainers on. Leela looked from her mother to Daniel. Is my daddy coming? The question landed between them. Kerr kept his eyes on Ellie. We'll talk in the van, he said. Ellie seemed to understand. She took Leela's hand and reached for Tom. Do what Sergeant Kerr says, she whispered. Harris took the lower landing, rifle aimed towards the front of the house. The door's starting to go, he said under his breath. They've got weight behind it. Kerr nodded. We move now. Ellie came first, one hand gripping the rail, the other guiding the children. Each tread gave a soft groan, loud against the pounding from below. The house felt smaller with every step they took, the air pressed thin by the noise from outside. At the bottom of the stairs, Kerr turned them towards the kitchen. Keep them close, he said to Ellie. When we hit the garden, straight for the fence. Harris will cover us. She nodded again, face tight with focus. Behind them, another heavy blow hit the front door. The frame cracked. Harris glanced back once. We're out of time. Kerr raised his rifle. Then we go now. The next hit on the door was harder, wood splintering near the lock. Kerr could hear voices behind the blows, not words, just a raw sound of breath and effort. He turned to Harris. Cover the hall, short burst only. Harris took position behind a banister, the G36 tucked into his shoulder. The front glass bowed with each strike. Kerr guided Ellie through the kitchen, her hand still locked around Leela's wrists, with Tom pressed close to her leg. The back garden light had gone out, leaving only a wash of moonlight through the curtains. Kerr stepped to the door, checked the latch, then looked over his shoulder. Stay behind me until I say move. The front door gave a sharp crack, then silence. That half a second before everything goes wrong. Harris called from the hall. They're in. The sound that followed was a rush of broken wood and feet on tile. Kerr swung the back door open, the cold air hitting him as he pushed Ellie through. Go! He turned to cover the hall. Harris fired 2 controlled shots. Each echoed through the house, sharp and final. The third round jammed. He cursed and yanked the cocking handle. A figure came out of the shadowed hall, half running, half falling, arms wide. Harris drove the hatchet up under its chin and wrenched sideways. Teeth skittered to the floor and blood coated the wall. The body dropped across the doorway, blocking half the view. Move! Kerr shouted. Ellie was already lifting the children down the back step. They scrambled into the garden. The fence at the rear rattled with more movement, the noise from the front drawing attention. Kerr fired a burst down the hallway to buy time, then ran for the door. Harris backed through the kitchen, rifle up, the hatchet slick in his left hand. He slammed the door shut behind him and kicked a bin against it for good measure. Outside, the garden was a narrow run of grass bordered by fences. The sound from the street carried over the rooftops. Alarms, screaming, and a dull thud of something hitting metal. Ellie gathered the children near the rear fence. Kerr joined her, checking the rows of houses. We'll cut through the neighbour's garden, he said. It's quicker. Harris caught his breath beside him, eyes still on the kitchen door. They'll follow. Then we fight our way out, Kerr said. Just keep them moving. He glanced at the children once, and then the faint orange glow rising over Romford. Let's finish this before dawn. Ellie reached the fence, trying to lift Leela over. The girl's foot slipped on the wet wood. Kerr got there first and hauled her up, passing her to her mother, then boosted Tom. Behind them, the door buckled once, twice, and then burst. Harris swung the hatchet into the face of the first thing through. A face he didn't even bother to see. It went down the tangle of arms and legs. He turned and vaulted the fence, landing hard on the other side. Kerr was last. He put a round into the doorway before climbing, just enough to make the next wave flinch. Then he was over, boots hitting tarmac. Run! He shouted. Kerr was last. He put a round into the doorway before climbing. They sprinted down the alley. Harris covering the rear, Ellie half carrying Tom, and Leela ahead of her. At the end of the run, the van waited. A shadow against the pale sky. Kerr hit the key fob as they reached it. The locks clicked open with a sound too loud in the silence. Ellie threw the side door wide and bundled the children in. Harris jumped in after, slamming it shut as Kerr took the driver's seat. He started the engine. Hold on, he said. The van roared into gear, throwing them into the seats as the house behind finally gave way. The van shot forward, tyres slipping on the wet road before gripping again. Kerr kept the headlights off, but the engine's roar was enough to wake the whole street. Figures spilled from driveways and side alleys. Drawn by the sound, they came fast, faster than anything that should move after midnight. Harris twisted in the passenger seat, looking back through the rear window. They're coming out of every bloody corner. Kerr didn't answer. He gripped the wheel tight, set his jaw, and aimed the van between parked cars. Something hit the side panel with a dull thump. Another shape loomed ahead, barefoot, moving on pure instinct. Kerr swerved. He clipped it with the bumper. The body rolled under the tyres. The van jolted, then steadied. Ellie's voice came from the back, high and shaking. What's going on? What are they? Harris looked over his shoulder. The children were huddled against her, eyes wide. We don't know, he said, keeping his voice level. It started hours ago. Anyone bitten turns into one of them. That's all we've got. Kerr braked hard as 2 more ran from the side road. One hit the bonnet, hands smearing blood across the glass before sliding off. The other slammed into the driver's door, face pressed against the window, eyes white in the half-light. Kerr floored the accelerator. The van lurched forward, throwing the thing aside. But the sound drew more. They came from between houses and over garden walls, a moving tide of bodies. Harris leaned out the window and fired short, careful bursts. The left side's clear, mate, he shouted. Kerr aimed for a gap ahead, straight down the middle of the road. A group of 6 tried to block them. He didn't break. The van hit them full on, thuds under the tyres, one rolling up onto the bonnet and off again. Ellie screamed once, covering Tom's eyes with a hand. The van kept moving. Harris ducked back inside and slammed a new magazine home. Keep straight, don't stop for anything. Kerr's hands were slick on the steering wheel. I wasn't planning to. They cleared the last of the street and turned onto the main road east. Behind them, the house was lost into smoke and noise. The street filled with movement. Ahead, the city stretched dark and broken. The only thing left to do was drive. The street opened into a wider road lined with shuttered shops and broken glass. Kerr kept his foot down, weaving around the shells of cars left where the drivers had panicked and ran. The steering wheel jumped in his hand each time the wheel clipped a curb or a body. "Hold on," he said, not looking back. Harris braced against the dash, scanning the corners. "They're chasing the sound," he said. "Look at them. No direction till we make noise. Then they all turn the same way. Then we keep momentum," Kerr added. They hit another small group that spilled out of a side street. The van jolted once, then again. Something caught under the front bumper, dragging for a few yards before tearing loose. Ellie covered her mouth but couldn't stop the sound that escaped her. "Is this everywhere?" she said. Harris turned in his seat. The children were pressed together, faces hidden in a side. "In London, yes." Kerr kept his eyes on the road. "Barkin was holding a line earlier. If the army's still there, we'll be fine." Harris gave a short laugh with no humour in it. "Do you really believe that?" "I need to," Harris fired back. They passed a petrol station. One pump burnt like a torch, light in the forecourt in strobing orange. Bodies lay across the tarmac, some of them still moving. Kerr took the next corner hard. The van tilted enough to make Ellie grab for a side rail. The road ahead widened again, and for the first time he could see the distant glow of floodlights. "There," Harris said. "That's the junction, the army checkpoint." The relief in his voice didn't last. As they drew closer, the scene took shape. The trucks were still there, some on the sides. The canvas shredded. Sandbags had been kicked apart and scattered across the road. The lights still burned, but no one was manning them. Kerr slowed the van to a crawl. The smell hit them before they reached the barricade. Diesel, blood, and burnt fabric. Ellie leaned forward between the seats. "Are they?" "Stay down," Kerr said. "Keep the kids' heads down." He shifted into neutral and let the van roll forward a few meters. Spent casings glittered under the floodlights. The first bodies came into view. A soldier in full gear, helmet gone, one boot missing, eyes open and glassy. Harris's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's no one left." Kerr eased the van to a stop beside an overturned truck. The smell of burnt diesel clung to everything, a smell so thick it almost developed a flavour. The floodlights threw a harsh glare across the scene, picking out twisted metal and pieces of uniform that still moved in the wind. One of the soldiers lay half on the road, one arm raised, fingers twitching against the tarmac. When Kerr stepped closer, the man's head rolled towards the sound, eyes open, throat working as if to form a word. The noise that came out was not one. Kerr drew his Glock, thumbed off the safety, and took a slow breath. The shot cracked sharp in the open air. The soldier's head snapped back and went still. The sound echoed down the empty street and died without an answer. He crouched beside the body, scanning the ground. A dented green tin lay a few feet away, half hidden under a torn tarpaulin. The lid was warped where it had been hit on the road. He pried it up with the edge of his knife and saw the dull brass gleam inside. "Lucky day," he muttered. He stood, slung the tin towards the van. "Catch." Harris caught it on the second try, grinning for the first time that night. "If this is what I think it is." He popped the latch the rest of the way and let out a low whistle. 5.56, full load. "Start topping the magazines off," Kerr said. He looked back down towards the shadows beyond the barricade, pistol still in hand. "We don't know how long it'll stay quiet." Harris nodded, already working. He spread a poncho across his knees, spilled the rounds out and began filling magazines one by one. The sharp clicks of metal on metal sounded clean in the cold air. The rhythm steadied both of them. Kerr watched the far end of the street while Harris worked. Every few seconds he caught a flicker of movement in the floodlight's edge. A shape that wasn't wind, too smooth to be smoke. The silence between the clicks started to feel shorter. "How many full?" Kerr asked. "4 so far. Maybe 6 if we squeeze. Load 'em all. We'll need every last one." Kerr holstered the pistol and climbed back into the driver's seat. Harris finished the last magazine and handed it forward. "We're good for now." Kerr took it and slid it into the rifle beside him. "Then we move before the noise brings company." He dropped the van into gear, eyes fixed on the black road ahead, and pressed the accelerator until the bodies and the checkpoint were behind them. Chapter 3. Kerr kept the van at a steady 40. Enough speed to feel like movement without outrunning what his eyes could read. He drove without the radio on, without any voice but the three inside, and the small sleeping sounds from the back. Harris had his rifle laid across his knees, magazines lined on a folded jacket so they wouldn't rattle. He counted under his breath. That's 4 full, but there's one I don't trust. We'll use the ones you trust, Kerr said. Harris swapped the weak spring to the bottom of the stack and clipped the good ones to the door pocket. Glocks. Both topped, Kerr said. Keep yours where you can get it without thinking. Harris slid the pistol into the doorwell grip. Fuel says under half, he added, glancing at the gauge. That's optimistic on these vans, but it'll get us to Plaistow if we don't sit in anything stupid. Oh, we're not sitting, said Kerr. Ellie leaned forward between the seats. She kept her voice low so it wouldn't carry to the children. How long? If the roads stay open, half an hour, Kerr said. If we have to turn around more than once or twice, bit longer. Leela shifted in her sleep, her head on Ellie's lap. Tom slept with his face pressed against the seat, small breaths fogging the vinyl. Should I wake them? Ellie asked. Let them have what they can get, Kerr replied. It won't happen often anymore. Harris looked through the windscreen, scanning the edges. We're not taking the main drag. There's too many places to be funneled. We'll dogleg through the industrial bit. Cut back south near the park, then across. He tapped the map with a finger and folded it again. If we hit anything heavy, I'll get out and look before we commit. Kerr nodded. If we stop, you clip that Glock to your leg. Don't be reaching around in the footwell with your head down. It's not my first day, Harris fired back. It was dry. There wasn't much warmth in it. They drove a dozen more streets without speaking. The wipers ticked once across a dry screen and settled. Somewhere ahead a shutter banged and went quiet. Kerr felt his shoulders ease a fraction at the sound. Noise meant distance and something to measure. Convoy still moving at first light, Harris asked. That's the plan, Kerr replied. Doyle won't hold it for anyone. She shouldn't, Harris said. Big targets don't get second chances anymore. Ellie was quiet for a long time, watching the road with them. How many people are at the depot, she asked. Enough to make it worth trying, Kerr said. That sounds like a small number. It's a number we've got, Harris replied, not unkind. There were more. We lost some to calls like yours. We lost some inside the fence. Everyone's tired. The ones who can still move are the ones in the convoy. Ellie absorbed it without comment. After a minute, she asked, Do you need me to do anything? Just keep them two settled, Kerr said. A look in the mirror at the two small shapes. If we stop, you stay in the van unless I say otherwise. If I tell you to move, you do not wait for me to finish the sentence. All right, she replied. Harris tapped the dash with a thumbnail, thinking, if we hit a block and there's a way through on foot. No, we don't split, Kerr said, not tonight. Harris nodded and let it go. They rolled up on a junction where sight lines opened a little. Kerr eased off the accelerator and let the van coast the last few yards, tyres whispering. He checked left and then took it without stopping. You're quiet, Ellie said to him after a while. Not a complaint. I'm counting, Kerr said. Counting what? Options. He let the words sit. We keep 3 at all times. If the road's blocked, if the engine dies, if the noise brings more than we can handle. If I've got 3, I'm never choosing between nothing and the wrong thing. Harris smiled without showing teeth. He's like that even on a Monday morning. Ellie smiled. Does that work, having 3? It's worked often enough to still try it, Kerr said. They passed a side road where a car was sat idling in the middle of the lane with no one in the driver's seat. Harris watched it until it was behind them. You want me to ride the hand mic and see if anyone's alive on local? Kerr shook his head. If they are, they'd be shouting already. The last thing we need is to tell every ear for a mile where we are. That's a fair one, Harris replied. He checked the rear again, then the mirrors. Feels like it should be noisier. It's the quiet part I don't like, Kerr replied. It means whatever's out there is listening. They turned off the main road where Harris pointed and followed a narrow service lane that ran between a row of shuttered industrial units. The tarmac here was cleaner, edges sharp where it met the curb. The van's tyres whispered instead of growling. Bridge ahead, Harris said. If the span's still intact, we'll be cut in 20 minutes. Kerr nodded once. The world beyond the windscreen felt like a map someone had folded too many times. Familiar pieces just all in the wrong order. The overpass came into view, a dark rib of concrete above a mess of parked lorries. One had jackknifed across the on-ramp. Its load spilled in a scatter of steel drums. The way through wasn't open, but it wasn't closed either. Kerr stopped a few car lengths short. "Stay with the kids," he said to Ellie. She started to speak, but he was already out. The air was damp, faintly metallic. Harris climbed down on the passenger side, rifle ready but muzzle down. "I'll check the angle on the other side, see if we can push through." "Make it quick," Kerr replied. He watched Harris walk the line of trucks, moving low, scanning under each chassis. The silence had that thick, padded quality that means things were close. Kerr moved along the front of the van, eyes on the high shadows under the bridge. It was the kind of space that held echoes too long, the kind where footsteps might answer late. Harris waved from the far side. "It's clear enough to squeeze by if we keep tight." Something answered him, not with words, but with motion. A single figure dropping from the bridge girder above, landing between them and the van. Its knees folded wrong, but it didn't stop moving. Kerr didn't shout. He raised the rifle and fired a single burst that took it in the chest, then again higher when it didn't fall fast enough. The sound was a hammer blow in the still air. From the shadow under the bridge came more movement, not a rush, just a scrape of feet, a dozen places all at once. Harris was already running back, calling out, "They're coming from underneath!" Kerr backed towards the van, firing in short, measured bursts, each shot bright against the dark concrete. Shapes pulled free of the shadows and began to run, hands out, heads low. Harris cleared the bonnet, swung into the passenger seat. "Go, go, go!" Kerr dropped the rifle into his lap, slammed the gear stick into first and floored it. The van hit the lead body at 20 miles an hour. The thud was solid, like hitting a wall that moved. The thing rolled under the van and did not come out the other side. The rest hit in a blur, shoulders, arms, faces in the light, for an instant before the glass smeared. Kerr kept his hands locked on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the small gap ahead. Harris braced against the dash. "Straight through!" The van squeezed past a jackknife lorry, mirror scraping metal, then broke free on the far side of the bridge. Kerr didn't slow until the rear view showed nothing but empty road. He breathed once, hard. Harris wiped a sleeve across his face. "That's new," he said. "They're waiting now, not wondering." Kerr kept his eyes on the road. Let's not give them time to wait. Street signs blurred past, half of them twisted or gone, but he knew the turns by instinct. No one spoke for a while. The city was almost quiet now. No alarms, no engines, just the sound of wind through broken glass. Harris leaned forward, scanned the dark road ahead. "Just under the mile, after the next junction we'll see the wall." Ellie looked out through the side window, voice barely above a whisper. "It's too quiet." Kerr said, "That'll change soon enough." The glow reached them first, a dull orange halo where the depot sat behind rows of flats. Then came the noise, gunfire in short, sharp bursts, echoing off the buildings. The convoy hadn't left. It was fighting too. "Still alive in there," Harris said, loading a fresh magazine. "Let's make sure they stay that way." Kerr swung the van onto the approach road. Smoke drifted low across the tarmac, catching the headlights and turning the air to fog. The gate was ahead, half open. One of the heavy panels was bent inwards, muzzle flashes blinking inside the yard. He braked hard, the tyres skidding a few feet before gripping. "That's as far as we drive," he said. Harris was already at the door, rifle ready. "Copy that." Kerr turned to Ellie. "Keep them flat on the floor. If you hear shooting close, don't look up." She nodded once. Her hands found the kids and pulled them down between the seats. Kerr and Harris stepped out together. Heat rolled down the road in waves. A single flare arced up from inside the depot and burst above the wall, throwing the street into red light. For a heartbeat, the shadows turned into faces. Figures swarming near the gate, uniforms and civilians mixed. No way to tell which were still human. Kerr chambered a round into his rifle. "No time for plans," he said. "We make a hole and get them through." Harris looked at him, face streaked with soot. "After you, boss." They moved forward at a jog, rifle up, smoke curling around their legs. The depot loomed larger with every step, its walls breathing fire and sound. The main gate was twisted open by a wrecked van that had tried to ram through and jammed itself in the gap. Figures moved around it, half crawling, half dragging. Some were wearing what had been police uniforms, sleeves torn away. Harris pointed towards the gate. "That's the only way in." "Then we have to make it work," Kerr replied. They went forward at a crouch. The sounds of gunfire from inside the depot came in bursts, short, controlled, and professional. The noise outside was different, the heavy erratic impacts of the infected pounding the wall. A shape came out of the smoke ahead of them, staggering fast. Harris fired once. The round took it high in the chest and spun it sideways. Another came from the left, hands clawing at the air, mouth open. Kerr swung his hatchet, caught it in the base of the neck and pushed the body aside. Ellie's voice came faintly from the van behind. "Daniel!" "Stay there," Kerr shouted back. "Don't move." Harris pressed a fresh magazine into place. "Gate's crawling," he said. "We need a gap." Kerr drew the breacher from his pack and stepped forward. He fired both shells into a tangle of bodies at the van's bumper. The blast turned the noise into a wall of echoes. When the smoke cleared, there was a path. "Move," he shouted. They ran. Harris covered the left flank, dropping anything that moved. Kerr reached the gate, grabbed a handhold on the wrecked van and pulled himself up. The driver inside was still belted in, head gone, arms twitching. Kerr kicked the door open, shoved the body out and climbed over into the depot yard. Inside, the noise was worse. Gunfire, shouted orders, engines coughing. He dropped to the ground and turned back, covering Harris as he climbed through. "Kerr, inside!" A voice called from somewhere near the vehicles. He recognised Doyle. Kerr waved once towards the van where Ellie waited. "Get them through," he shouted. Then he turned and ran towards the sound of the fight. The yard was half light and half smoke. Vehicles stood at odd angles where they'd been abandoned, doors open, lights still pulsing. Kerr could make out the depot buildings through the hazes, officers to the right, armory block on the left, the motor pool dead in the centre. Muzzle flashes stuttered from the roofline. Doyle was there, kneeling behind a transit van with two constables crouched beside her. One was trying to reload a rifle with shaking hands, the other pressing a field dressing against the thigh. Doyle's face was streaked with soot, eyes bright and fixed. "Kerr," she shouted over the noise, "get that family in here." "They're coming," he called back. Outside the gate, the infected were converging, drawn by the sounds of the breacher. The gap was filling again, dozens now, stumbling over each other, arms out, throats raw with that animal sound that had replaced words. Harris took position by the twisted van frame, firing measured bursts to thin the line. Every shot hit clean, the rest slowed the wave without stopping it. The smell of cordite mixed with rotten hot oil. Kerr ran back to the road, waving for Ellie. "Now! Bring them now!" She came fast, one arm around each child, heads ducked. The sound made Tom cry out, but she kept him moving. Harris shifted his line of fire to cover them, brass bouncing off the van roof. Kerr reached them halfway, grabbing Tom and slung the boy against the shoulder. Ellie pulled Leela by the hand, nearly dragging her the last few yards. They stumbled through the gap as Harris emptied the last of his magazine. "Inside now!" Kerr shouted. Doyle's people threw the gate bars back into place the second they cleared the opening. The metal clanged home just as the first bodies hit it from the other side. The force of the impact rattled through the frame. Harris leaned against the van, breathing hard. "They're not stopping." "They won't," Kerr said. He turned towards Doyle. "What's the situation?" She checked the street beyond the gate once more, then met his eyes. "We've got 10 minutes at best. After that, the wall goes. Convoy's almost ready to roll, but we're short 2 drivers and out of time." Kerr nodded, wiped his sleeve across his face. "Then we hold it until they move." Doyle handed him a half-empty magazine. "You've got it, Sergeant." The next impact on the gate sounded like thunder. The next hit made the hinges groan. Harris and one of the depot constables braced a steel barrier against the inner side, wedging it with whatever they could find. Crates, broken fencing, even an office chair. Each slam from outside sent a tremor through the yard. Doyle barked orders without raising a voice. "Load everything of value. Keep the engines hot. We move as soon as those gates break or the trucks are full, whichever comes first." Kerr saw one of the vans, filled with civilians, wide-eyed and silent. "Who's left to drive?" he asked. "Me, Patel, and 2 volunteers who've never handled a manual in their lives," Doyle said. "We lost Fletcher on the east wall." Kerr nodded once. "I'll take one of them, Harris can handle the other." Harris turned at his name. Sweat streaked the dirt from his face. "Negative. We need to hold the line." Kerr saw the dark patch growing under his sleeve and didn't ask. There wasn't time. Another impact shut the gate. Harder than before, bolts jumped in their sockets. One of the constables by the barrier muttered something under his breath. Kerr went back to the front, climbed on top of the crumpled van's bonnet, and looked over the top of the gate. The sight stopped him cold. The street outside was full. Hundreds pressing forward, a river of movement. Pale faces packed shoulder to shoulder. The sound was constant, like waves breaking on rock. He dropped back down. Christ, they're going to be through soon. Doyle's radio cracked on a belt. A thin voice came through, barely audible under the static. Control, this is Convoy 1, ready to depart. Requesting clearance. She grabbed the handset. Negative, Convoy 1. Hold position till I give the word. She looked at Kerr. You heard that. We've got one chance. Buy me a couple of minutes. Kerr nodded. We'll buy you whatever we can. He turned back to Harris. We take the line at the gate, mate. Nothing crosses it. Harris smiled tightly. Sounds simple. Kerr climbed up beside him, through the narrow gap where the panels met. He could already see fingers reaching through, nails clawing at air. He slammed a fresh magazine home, checked the chamber and looked at Harris. On my mark, mate. The gate shuddered again, metal screaming against metal. 1. Another hit. 2. The top hinge snapped. 3. The gate burst inwards and a yard filled with noise. The gate folded in on itself with a tearing sound, metal shrieking against the posts. A wave of figures poured through the gap. Arms, faces, uniforms still recognisable from the depot. They came without pause or sound beyond the constant rasp of breath. Kerr fired first. Short burst to break the front line. The rifle kicked hard against his shoulder. Harris joined him. The two weapons beating out a rhythm that matched the pounding in Kerr's chest. The first rank fell, tripping the ones behind, but the line kept coming. Bodies climbed over bodies. Left side, Harris shouted. He swung the muzzle, raked a burst across a cluster moving by the wall. Kerr hit the breacher, slung on his back, dropped to one knee, and fired point blank at the centre of mass of the crowd. The blast filled the yard with smoke and noise. Shrapnel and bones slapped the wall behind. Reload, Harris called. Kerr ducked behind a van frame, swapping magazines, blood running down his cheek from flying grit. He could hear Doyle yelling somewhere behind him. Trucks grinding into gear, men shouting to one another. Ellie's voice cut through the rest, faint but clear from the far side of the yard. Daniel! The kids! Keep 'em down, he shouted back without turning. Harris leaned out to fire again. His rifle clattered dry halfway through the burst. He dropped it, drew the Glock, and kept shooting one-handed. The gate's lost, he shouted. We've got to fall back to the trucks. Not yet, Kerr shouted. He slammed another shell into the breacher, fired, racked it, fired again. The recoil drove up his arm. We hold until they move. The first truck began to roll past, engine whining. Doyle was on the running board, radio in one hand, pistol in another. Kerr, pull back. That's everyone we're getting. Kerr nodded once. Go! Harris fired 3 more rounds, then turned and stumbled back, reloading as he moved. The infected poured over the wreckage, feet slipping in the blood and oil. Kerr fired until the rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and drew his sidearm and backed towards the line of trucks. The second vehicle lurched forward, wheels spinning, and he grabbed the side rail using it to steady his aim. Kerr planted his boots and let the rifle hang. The pistol came up in his right hand, the hatchet in his left. He stepped into the surge without a word. The first body hit him square in the chest. He fired once, the round snapping the head back so hard it folded over the spine. Before it dropped, another took its place. He swung the hatchet, felt the sickening impact on the infected neck, wrenching it free, and kept moving. The air was a furnace, thick with heat and a metallic stink of blood. He didn't think about what he was doing. He worked. The pistol barked twice more, each shot clearing space. He pivoted, drove the axe down into a neck, booted the body off the blade, turned and fired again. A shape came in low from his blind side. He met it with the hatchet's butt, cracked bone, and finished it with a shot through the mouth that blew the sound out of his ears. He was breathing in short, ragged bursts now, his own heartbeat hammering louder than the gunfire. Another hand grabbed at his shoulder. He spun, fired from the hip, saw the face tear open in the muzzle flash, and brought the hatchet down once more for certainty. The handle was slick. He had to choke up on it to keep his grip. The pistol clicked empty. He threw it into a face and charged, both hands on the hatchet, swinging it in tight arcs until the bodies in front of him stopped moving. When it was over, the noise fell away for a moment. Kerr stood in the haze, chest heaving, blood dripping from his sleeves, the hatchet dragging at his arm. All he'd brought were a few seconds of stillness, but in that yard full of death, a few seconds was everything. Doyle, he called. She turned, face lit by muzzle flashes. "We're leaving now!" Kerr looked to Harris. The younger man was limping, blood dark on his sleeve, still firing. "Get to the last truck," Kerr said. Harris shook his head. "I'll cover the gate." Kerr stepped toward him. "You can't." "Go," Harris snapped. "You'll lose them if you don't." Another burst of gunfire cut the argument short. Kerr met his eyes once more, then turned and ran for the rear truck as it began to roll. He pulled himself onto the running board, yelling for Ellie to keep the children's heads down. As the convoy pushed through the depot's far exit, the yard behind dissolved into noise and flame. Harris stood alone by the broken gate, emptying his last magazine into the crowd until they reached him. Kerr didn't look back. He only heard the last echoes of gunfire fade as the trucks picked up speed and the depot disappeared in the smoke. Chapter 4. The motorway should have been empty that hour. Kerr had expected a long stretch of grey tarmac and broken cars, more of the same, but instead he drove straight into a wall of red brake lights. The convoy slowed one vehicle at a time until it stopped. Ahead, the road curved gently upwards, blocked with cars, vans, buses, anything that could move. People were already out on foot, shouting, waving arms. It looked like a traffic jam from another life, until he saw the smoke and the faces. Doyle's voice came through on the radio. "All units hold position. Keep the engines running." Kerr lifted the handset. "What's the hold-up?" "Unknown," she replied. "We've lost contact with the lead scout. I'll go forward on foot." Kerr leaned out of the van's window. Dawn had scraped a thin line of pale light across the horizon. The air smelt of wet asphalt and exhaust. Hundreds of figures milled ahead, framed by that light, their movements restless. Ellie stirred in the passenger seat, one hand on Tom's shoulder. "Why are we stopping?" "Traffic," Kerr said. "Stay in the vehicle." Leela sat upright from the back. "There are people outside." Kerr looked again. There were too many for coincidence. Families with bags, old men in dressing gowns, women pushing prams. Some walked between cars shouting for space, others sat on roofs wrapped in blankets. The whole motorway had turned into a river of stranded people. He climbed out. The air was cold and filled with a constant low hum, engines idling, voices blended into a single tired note. Harris's absence hit him then. The space where a second pair of boots should have been beside him. He shut that thought down and moved along the hard shoulder towards Doyle's vehicle. She was already ahead, cutting through the throng of people, a constable at her side. Kerr fell in behind them. A man in a high-vis jacket caught Doyle's sleeve. "It's blocked up there," he said. "The whole bridge is shut. Army or something. Won't let anyone through." "Who told you that?" Doyle asked. The man pointed towards the curve of the road. "People coming back from the front. They're testing everyone. Some sort of checkpoint." "Testing for what?" He shrugged helplessly. "Don't know. Infection, maybe. They've got tents and guns. No one's getting out." The words spread, even as he said them. Others nearby picked them up, passing them along in fragments. "Army up ahead. Shooting everyone who pushes. No one leaves the city." Kerr felt a shift in the crowd before he heard it. The tone of the noise changed. No longer anxiety, but anger. A wave of motion ripped through the mass of people and began to push forward, craning for a view of the road beyond the bend. Doyle turned to Keir. "We need eyes on that checkpoint. If they're really locking this down, we can't stay in the open." He nodded. "I'll go up." She hesitated. "Take someone with you." He looked around. All he had was the crowd and his sidearm. "I'll manage." He moved along the verge, keeping to the shadow of the tall lorries. The noise thickened as he went. The scrape of metal on metal, the rising pitch of voices. A man stumbled out from between cars and grabbed Kerr's arm. His eyes were wide, his breath sour. "They're shooting people," he said. "Anyone who looks sick. You've got to turn back." "Who's shooting?" Kerr asked. "The soldiers. They're not listening anymore." The man shook his head violently and then melted back into the crowd. Kerr pressed on until he reached the crest of the slope. From there he could see the source of the chaos. Across the motorway, a line of military trucks blocked every lane. Floodlights had been rigged to the vehicles, throwing hard white glare across the scene. Soldiers stood in rows behind the lights, rifles at the ready, their voices lost in the din. Beyond them, a line of green tents and makeshift barricades stretched towards the horizon. Civilians packed the space between the lights and the wall of cars. Some were shouting, others pleading. A young soldier stepped forward, hands raised, trying to calm them. A bottle flew from the crowd and shattered near his feet. Someone screamed. The soldiers tightened the line. Kerr took it in quickly. The guns, the order, the fear, a quarantine ring. They weren't letting anyone leave. He ducked behind a bus as a burst of automatic fire rocked the motorway. The sound rolled down the road in waves. When he looked again, the soldiers were shouting at the crowd to get back. People were scattering, climbing over barriers and running for cover. He turned and pushed his way back through the stream of panicked bodies. Doyle caught him halfway. "What is it?" she asked. "Military cordon," he said. "Full lockdown. No one's getting past that line." Her expression didn't change, but a hand went to the radio. "Then London's a cage," she said, "and we're still inside it." By the time Kerr fought his way back to the convoy, the motorway had turned into a living thing, breathing, surging, pulsing in all different directions. The noise had doubled in volume, not a roar exactly, but a rolling current of panic. He could feel it in his boots. Doyle was shouting orders at the drivers to keep the engines running and the civilians inside the trucks, but half of them were already climbing out. People were abandoning the vehicles in every direction. They didn't care about orders anymore. They wanted to see, to move, to not be the ones left behind. "What's happening?" Ellie called from the rear of the van, one arm wrapped around Tom. "Why is everyone shouting?" Kerr pushed his way through the moving bodies towards her. Armies blockading the motorway. No one's leaving London without clearance. "Clearance for what?" "Infection," he said. "They've set up testing stations. It's not going well." Leela's voice trembled. "So we can't leave?" Kerr didn't answer. He checked the horizon again. The floodlights from the military line threw long shadows across the crowd. Every time someone moved in front of them, the crowd reacted like a single nervous animal. The whole mass kept edging forwards, even when there was nowhere to go. Doyle reappeared beside him, radio pressed to her ear. "Every frequency's jammed," she said. "They're broadcasting emergency orders. Stay in vehicles, await instructions. No one's listening." "Would you?" Kerr asked. She didn't answer. She looked past him towards the families in the road, the old ones sitting on the central barrier with their heads down, the children crying in the noise. A man stumbled out the press of bodies and slammed into Kerr. "They're shooting," he said, spittle flying from his lips. "Up there, by the bridge. They're shooting everyone." The words rippled out like a shockwave. People started running in random directions, climbing over car bonnets, pushing past one another. Someone knocked Doyle's radio from a hand. It hit the ground and cracked open. Kerr grabbed Ellie's shoulder. "Get the kids behind the van and stay low." "What's happening?" she demanded. "The crowd's about to break. Do not let them pull you in." The first gunfire came seconds later. Short bursts carried on the wind. The floodlights flared brighter, cutting through the thick haze that may have been tear gas or smoke. A group of civilians broke through the centre line and rushed towards the military trucks. Kerr saw them, only in fragments, shapes in the lights, arms raised shouting. Then the soldiers opened up again. Screams tore through the noise. Panic surged. The crowd stopped being a crowd and became a stampede. People shoved each other, climbed over guardrails, trampled anyone who fell. Kerr looked back to the convoy. The trucks were boxed in by cars and people. "We can't drive through that. Then we go on foot." She turned to the remaining officers. "Grab what you can carry. Stay with the families." Ellie gripped his arm. "Daniel, where do we go?" "Anywhere but here," he said. They formed a rough line. Doyle at the front, Kerr and Ellie in the centre, with the children and two constables covering the rear. The idea of order lasted maybe 30 seconds before the flow of bodies swallowed them. The air was thick with exhaust and sweat. Every breath tasted like metal. Kerr kept one hand on Ellie's shoulder and one on Leela's jacket. The children were silent now, faces blank with shock. A man crashed into them from the side, swinging his arms blindly. Kerr shoved him off, but another fell into his place. It was like wading through a river that wanted them gone. Up ahead, a flare went off, bathing everything in red light. The motorway glowed like an open wound. For a moment, Kerr saw the soldiers clearly, silhouettes against the flare, rifles raised. The crowd kept pushing towards them as if light meant safety. "Doyle!" Kerr shouted. "We're too close to the line." She looked back, faces streaked with soot. "Find cover!" They ducked between two cars as another burst of gunfire rattled down the road. Glass exploded, showering them. A man went down beside Kerr, clutching his stomach. He looked young, not much older than Harris. Kerr pulled Ellie close. "Stay down. Don't move until I tell you." The crowd surged again. People leapt over the barrier into the opposite carriageway. Others tried to scramble up the embankment. It was chaos in every direction. Horns blaring, engines revving, 1,000 different shouts blending into one. Doyle crawled over to them. "They're firing warning shots," she said, though it didn't sound convinced. "If we stay on this side, they should hold their fire." "Until the next flare goes up," Kerr said. From somewhere behind them came another sound. A rising, guttural scream that did not belong to fear. Kerr turned toward it. The noise spread fast, swallowed by the panic, but still distinct. It was a sound he recognized all too well. "Christ," Doyle muttered. "It's here." Kerr stood, scanning the rear of the crowd. Even through the chaos, he could still see the shift happening. Pockets of stillness collapsing into violence. People turning on one another. Not to fight, but to feed. "Keep the kids close," he told Ellie. "Whatever happens, don't let go." The gunfire up ahead redoubled as soldiers saw what was coming. The floodlights tilted, tracking the movement in the crowd. The line of rifles fired again, not into the air this time, but into the sea of people pressing towards them. The world erupted. Kerr grabbed Ellie's arm and pulled her towards the hard shoulder. Boyle shouted something lost in the noise. The air filled with screams, bullets, and the mechanical chatter of automatic fire. Gunfire rolled up the motorway in long bursts that never quite stopped. Every time the rifles paused, something else took over. The cries, the engines, the endless hammering of thousands of feet on tarmac. Kerr pushed forward with one hand clamped on Ellie's arm, the other gripping Leela's sleeve. Tom was in her arms, his face buried against her shoulder. Doyle was a few meters ahead, waving them towards a barrier. "Up here," she shouted. "Get off the road." The embankment rose steep and slick with morning dew. People were already climbing it, scrambling through a thin layer of grass towards the tree line above. Some made it, others fell back, dragging more down with them. Kerr glanced back over his shoulder. The rear of the crowd was moving strangely now, not as a single surge, but in fragments, rippling in waves of motion and stillness. He saw someone fall, thrash, then rise again in a way no living body should. "Move now," he barked. They climbed. Halfway up, a man slid past them on his back, eyes wide, mouth working soundlessly. Blood covered his chest and neck. Ellie tried to stop and help him, but Kerr caught her wrist. "Don't," he said. "He's gone." At the top of the bank, they dropped into a service road running parallel to the motorway. The air smelt of diesel and wet earth. Behind them, the chaos swelled to a pitch that drowned everything else out. A group of soldiers ran across the road ahead, shouting orders Kerr could not make out. One of them waved them towards a cluster of lorries parked under the flyover. "Stay behind the vehicles," he yelled. "Get down and stay down." They obeyed. Kerr crouched behind the nearest truck, pulling Ellie and the children close. Doyle slid in beside him, breathing hard. "What do you see?" she asked. Kerr risked a glance around the bumper. The crowd below was breaking apart completely. In the floodlights, he could see the infection taking hold. The sudden jerk in movements, the collapse of one shape into another, the blur of red against the grey. People were turning faster than he'd ever seen. A woman near the centre fell to her knees, clutching her stomach. Those nearest to her tried to help, but she turned on them before they could react. Her mouth opened, her teeth found a man's face. He went down screaming, and then the light caught another. And another. "They're inside the crowd," Kerr said. "It's spreading through them." Doyle closed her eyes for a second. "God help us." The soldiers on the bridge above opened fire again. This was not warning shots. The floodlight flickered as bullets ripped through them. The infection moved like a living thing. Every time someone fell, 3 more took their place. The uninfected ran, but there was nowhere to run. The motorway was boxed in by trucks and barriers. Within minutes, the front ranks of the crowd were pressing against the soldiers' line. Kerr's radio hissed. A voice came through, one of Doyle's drivers, panicked and half drowned in static. "We can't hold position, they're everywhere." "Stay off the main road," Doyle shouted back into the handset. "Get the vehicles into cover." The rest was lost in the noise. A helicopter roared overhead, rotors chopping the air, spotlights sweeping the ground. It illuminated the true scale of it. The entire motorway crawling, and massive bodies moving as one. Then the chopper's gun opened up. The muzzle flashes cut white lines through the haze. "Down!" Kerr shouted. They hit the ground as the bullets chewed the tarmac around the lorries. The helicopter's rounds weren't discriminating. Anything that moved was a target now. The noise was unbearable. Metal tearing, engines exploding. The stutter of heavy weapons blended into the screams. When it stopped, the silence was almost as worse. Kerr lifted his head. Smoke drifted across the road in low sheets. A nearby car burned, its tyres bubbling. The smell was thick and oily. Ellie's voice came from beside him, small but steady. "What do we do?" Kerr looked at the children. Leela's eyes were wide, her face streaked with dirt. Tom was shaking but silent. "We keep moving," he said. "We find somewhere away from the crowd. The army's shooting at everyone down here." Doyle nodded, wiping dirt from a cheek. "There's an access tunnel under the bridge. It might link to the service lanes. We can cut through and circle back south." Kerr helped Ellie to her feet, lead the way. They moved quickly, keeping low. The tunnel was 20 metres ahead, half hidden by a row of crashed cars. A dozen others that had the same idea, families, a few lone stragglers. The crowd inside the tunnel pressed forward blindly, desperate for escape. As they reached the entrance, a figure staggered out, covered in blood. Kerr raised his pistol, but the man collapsed before he could fire. His throat was torn open. Behind him came the first of the infected. "Go!" Kerr shouted. The tunnel became a funnel for panic. People screaming and shoving, clawing at the walls to get past each other. Doyle fired down the passageway, each shot cracking loud enough to make the children cry. Kerr took point. The first infected came at him fast, eyes black, hands out. He fired twice, both rounds to the chest, then swung the hatchet one-handed as it kept coming. The edge caught under the jaw and dropped it. Another followed. He put a bullet through its temple. The shots echo off the concrete until his ears rang. "Keep them moving!" he yelled. Ellie dragged Leela by the arm. Tom clutched tight against her chest. Doyle was behind him, firing in bursts to hold the line. Bodies clogged the far end of the tunnel. People trampled in the rush. Kerr vaulted over them, pulling Ellie over, then turned back to cover Doyle. The light behind them flickered with muzzle flashes. When Doyle reached him, she was down to her last magazine. "That's it," she shouted. Kerr nodded and backed towards the exit. They spilled out onto a narrow service road on the far side of the bridge. For a moment, the air felt still again. The motorway was hidden behind the embankment, its noise muted. Then came the new sound, low, collective, and relentless. Kerr turned. The infected were pouring out of the tunnel mouth, crawling over the fallen, their skin slick with blood. The crowd from the motorway had become a single, pulsing mass, and it was coming after them. He raised his pistol, fired until it clicked empty, and then grabbed Ellie's arm. "Run!" They sprinted down the service road, past burning cars and a wreck of a coach lane on its side. The dawn light caught them, thin and sharp. Ahead, the road curved towards the east, away from the city. Behind them, London screamed. This is the end of Trojan 6 Part 3. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on notifications when Part 4 is released.